A young woman was kidnapped and locked in a secret room, where sand poured relentlessly from hidden openings, slowly filling the space and leaving her with fewer and fewer chances of survival. At the beginning of the film, we see a serial killer tormenting his victim. He sedates a man with an injection, then covers his head in plaster, leaving only his eyes and small openings for tubes to his mouth exposed. When the victim regains consciousness, the killer pours acid down his throat, watching as he writhes in agony and drowns in his own blood. The moment the man stops moving, the killer finishes him off with a hammer blow to the head. Meanwhile, a famous model gives interviews to various journalists. She talks about her life, her childhood fears, her weaknesses, and desires. As an unknown figure watches these recordings, he carefully cuts out snippets from newspapers and magazines, creating a twisted comic book about her. In his room, on a nearby table, VHS tapes labeled with women's names are neatly stacked. After studying his target for some time, the killer finally abducts the supermodel. She wakes up, disoriented, lying on a bed in an unfamiliar room. Outside the window, she sees palm trees swaying in the breeze, but as she gets closer, she realizes the truth. It's not a window at all, but a projection from an old film reel. The moment she understands this, the recording shuts off. Panicked, she stumbles back from the wall and frantically searches for an exit. Calming herself down, she demands an explanation, but no response comes. Suddenly, a compartment slides out from the wall. She cautiously approaches and finds a VHS tape inside. She inserts it into the nearby television and watches in horror as footage of someone walking through her apartment plays. The video then cuts to a nightclub, capturing the moment she suddenly felt ill, and then, the moment she was kidnapped. Enraged, she trashes the room, throwing objects and screaming for her release, insisting that she is a famous model and that the police must already be looking for her. Meanwhile, the police are investigating the latest murder. They comb through the crime scene but find nothing. The killer is meticulous, no evidence, no fingerprints. However, inside one of the cabinets, they discover a card with Greek writing and a small bowl filled with ash. Back in the room, the terrified model curls up in a corner, but then she hears the compartment open again. Running to it, she finds a stuffed teddy bear inside. The moment she takes it, the compartment closes. She clutches the bear and returns to her spot, but seconds later, the compartment slides open once more. This time, there's a key labeled locker number 1. She unlocks it and finds her belongings inside. Horrified, she throws them into the open compartment. A deafening sound erupts from the walls. The killer is displeased with her actions. Trembling, she retrieves her belongings, and the noise stops. Sitting on the couch, she inspects her things and, out of frustration, tears one of them apart. Instantly, the terrifying sound returns. Panicking, she scrambles under the bed and finds a nail file. A little later, using the file, she unscrews the vent cover and crawls into the duct. As she moves cautiously through the tight space, the television in her room flickers on, playing one of her interviews. Suddenly, she hears a noise ahead, then the screech of metal and the spinning blade of a saw. She freezes, then slowly backs away, only to spot a camera watching her. Heart racing, she doesn't know what to do next. That's when, from above, gloved hands emerge from the darkness, and something sharp is injected into her neck. The model wakes up to find herself back in bed, dressed in clothes from the locker. The passage to the ventilation duct is now sealed with a sheet of metal. Meanwhile, an unknown figure watches her through countless cameras and monitors. The police continue their hunt for the serial kidnapper. They've already linked the disappearance of the popular model to previous victims and are desperately searching for any common thread. Some time later, as she opens her eyes, the model notices a sliver of light on the wall. Moving closer, she realizes it leads to another room. Suddenly, a pair of eyes appear on the other side, staring right at her. She recoils in terror but gathers the courage to look again. It's a young man. The partition between their rooms turns out to be glass covered in black paint. He scratches a message onto it, asking who she is. A conversation sparks between them, and she learns that he, too, was kidnapped. She begs him to help her, but before he can respond, the lights go out. Thinking quickly, he strikes a match, revealing a small vent near the ceiling. Climbing up, they continue talking, and he hands her a box of matches to ease her fear of the darkness. She confesses that she already tried to escape once but failed. The maniac continues watching them on his monitors as they scrape away the paint covering the glass that separates their rooms. Meanwhile, he busies himself with bizarre experiments on rats. After some time, the two manage to clear a large section of the glass, finally seeing each other clearly. They introduce themselves and discuss their next move. Meanwhile, the kidnapper sorts through photographs of them, carefully cutting out certain parts. The young man asks how she was taken, and she explains that someone drugged her drink at a party. In turn, he shares his own story, unaware that the maniac is listening to every word. Elsewhere, the police persist with their investigation into the murders and abductions. Passing by an electronics store, one officer suddenly has an idea. Rushing back to his partner, he announces that he knows their next move. Back in the underground prison, the maniac enters the model's room. She freezes in fear, unsure of his intentions, but he simply walks around without touching her. Then, the television flickers on, replaying one of her interviews, followed immediately by a horrifying video of a woman being tortured. Moments later, a drawer snaps open. She rushes to it and finds a glass of sand, a card, and a box of matches. Reaching for the matches, she barely misses them. Suddenly, a blade descends from the center of the drawer, nearly slicing her hand. Before she can react, someone grabs her from behind, pressing a cloth soaked in chemicals over her nose. She struggles, inhales the fumes, and blacks out. Once again, the maniac places her back on the bed. This time, he carefully cuts a lock of her hair. Upstairs, he opens a handmade scrapbook and pastes the strand inside. When she wakes, she notices the missing lock of hair and finds a new key to a second locker. Inside, there's another set of clothes. She changes and wakes up Gary, telling him what happened. Furious, he tries to make sense of it, but nothing adds up. Wanting a distraction, they start talking about their pasts. The young man admits he used to work as a car smuggler. She smirks, unimpressed. Offended, he snaps, calling her a stuck-up bitch. As their argument escalates, the maniac watches them from his monitors, sipping a glass of wine. Meanwhile, one of the officers shares his idea. They need to check electronic stores and track large purchases. To keep tabs on the victim, the kidnapper must have bought a lot of cameras and other equipment. Back at the office, the two cops discuss the case with their colleague, who tells them that finding the model will be nearly impossible. Typically, such criminals subconsciously want to be caught, leaving behind clues or hints for the press, but this one isn't ready yet. They stand no chance unless he makes a mistake himself. Lying in bed, the girl fights off panic. She focuses on the flickering candle, telling herself that it's warm and light around her. Just then, the door opens, and the maniac enters. The unknown figure transports the bed with the girl into a glass-walled room. As soon as he leaves, sand starts pouring down from above. Regaining her senses, she realizes she's trapped. The sand slowly fills the space, and there's no way out. Desperately calling for help, she tries to break the glass, but it's hopeless. Meanwhile, the kidnapper watches her every move on the cameras. Gary hears her screams and rushes to help. He manages to get into the space between the floors. In a last-ditch effort, he punches a hole through the ceiling and pulls her up. After calming her down, he urges her to follow him. There may still be a chance to escape. Quietly and carefully, they make their way toward the exit, but the maniac notices their movements. Realizing they've been spotted, the two close all doors behind them and run toward the garage. Inside, they find a car. After a few failed attempts, they finally manage to start it. They ram through the gates and into another room, where the car is covered with a white cloth. The impact knocks Gary unconscious, and shortly after, gas starts pouring into the car from the vents, causing the girl to lose consciousness as well. The kidnapper returns them to their rooms and once again changes the model's clothes. Meanwhile, the police arrive at the Dexter brothers' kitchen. They question the owner about one of his employees. According to their information, the man has a criminal record and recently made a large purchase of electronics. He also worked at the party where the famous model was abducted. Not wanting any trouble, the owner provides them with the employee's address. When the girl wakes up, she notices she's wearing new clothes. She approaches the glass and sees Gary, telling him they'll never escape. He reassures her, convincing her that there's always a way out. At that moment, the kidnapper locks all the doors between them, and a compartment opens in the wall. The girl approaches and finds a key, which she uses to open a locker. Inside is an evening gown. Resigned, she changes into it. As soon as she does, the doors open. She rushes into Gary's arms, but on the TV, a video of a girl being tortured starts playing. Gary begs her not to look, but she can't tear her eyes away. Out of frustration, Gary grabs a pipe and smashes the cameras embedded in the walls. He figures out where they are. However, the kidnapper doesn't like this and turns off the lights in the rooms, heading towards them with a weapon. In the complete darkness, the girl hears the sounds of a struggle, a gunshot, and the sound of a body being dragged away. Throughout it all, she pleads for Gary's life. A few minutes later, the TV turns back on, and she sees the bound Gary with a gun pressed to his throat. Desperately, she begs again for his life to be spared. Eventually, the maniac brings in the body of the second victim and turns the lights on. Lying in bed with the girl, Gary tells her how attractive she is. They kiss, and then make love. All the while, the kidnapper watches, first through the cameras, and then in person. The police arrive at the address they were given, only to find that there is no house there. Later, Gary wakes up and tries to rouse Jennifer, but she refuses to get up. After smelling the empty bottle beside her, he realizes the maniac must have put something in it. Leaving the girl behind, he heads to the bathroom, where he undergoes a startling transformation. Afterward, he checks that Jeff is still asleep and quietly exits through a hidden side passage. He then climbs to the second floor of the house. In the kitchen, Dexter greets him, surprised by his appearance. He thought the guy wouldn't show up until morning. After a moment of thought, Gary admits to Ben that he doesn't want to kill Jeff. But Ben is resolute. This game has to end on time. Realizing he won't be able to save the girl any other way, the guy kills his brother, stabbing him with a knife. Dragging the body into the bathroom, he leaves it there. As he flips through comic books featuring previous victims, he hears a knock at the door. When he answers, he finds police officers there, asking for Benjamin Dexter. Gary tells them that he's not home and that he's just staying there temporarily. He can't get rid of them immediately. The officers mention that there's a game on TV and ask to check the score. He agrees. However, during a commercial break, they decide to change the channel and spot the surveillance camera on Jennifer. At that moment, Gary appears behind them with a gun and kills them both. He gathers all the pictures of them together from the walls and returns to the basement to the girl. After waking her up, he tells her he killed their kidnapper and that they can now escape. As they make their way upstairs, she sees the bodies of the two dead men. The guy asks her to stay in the room but not to touch anything. As soon as he leaves, one of the cops regains consciousness and starts heading toward Jeff. Terrified, she thinks he's coming to kill her. Grabbing a bat, she hits him in the head several times. He falls and lies still. Gary, returning, reassures her. He suggests they leave this place and forget everything that happened here. The girl can just say she wasn't kidnapped, that she met a cool guy and had fun with him. Horrified by everything, she agrees. He promises that it will only take him 20 minutes to destroy any evidence of their time there and asks her to wait. As Jeff looks around, he suddenly notices comic books with the names of different girls. When he opens them, he is horrified to realize that Gary is also a criminal, and he had been working with the other man all along. At that moment, she spots Ben, who has survived despite his stab wound. He attacks her and tries to strangle her. However, the girl manages to finish him off with the same knife. In a panic, she searches for an escape, but all the doors and windows are locked, and the glass is shatterproof. Just then, Gary returns. He hands her a chemical to wash away the blood and asks her to help clean up. She agrees but seizes the opportunity, spraying the chemical in his eyes before running away. She rushes down to the basement, trying to find another exit. Gary chases her, realizing that she knows everything now. Hiding behind one of the walls, Jennifer spots a gun on the floor and decides to trap him. Using the lights to deceive him, she shoots Gary several times. Before he dies, he tells her that she managed to escape her prison, unlike him. Shooting out all the locks on the doors, Jennifer steps outside and walks away from the house. Do you think Jennifer had any chance of resisting Gary's charm, or was he manipulating her in such a subtle way that she couldn't escape? Share your thoughts in the comments down below, give a thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next videos.